All right, so you guys sent us some really interesting stuff on Bitcoin mining this week. It looks like you pulled some excerpts from an Investopedia article.
Yeah.
Which honestly is a really good starting point for a deep dive, I think. Our goal today is to kind of get into like the nitty-gritty of what Bitcoin mining is all about, how it all works, why it matters, and we'll try to extract the key insights from that article without, getting too bogged down in the jargon. So think of it like a little guide to understanding this whole Bitcoin mining thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The stuff you sent is a really good framework, I think. And it's kind of crazy how this like abstract digital process has such, real world effects.
Right.
So yeah, let's unpack it.
Okay, so first and foremost, like what even is Bitcoin mining? The article actually calls it a network-wide competition to generate a cryptographic solution that matches specific criteria.
Okay.
So it sounds like a pretty intense digital race.
Yeah. I mean, you can think of it like a big digital puzzle that tons of people are all trying to solve at the same time. And whoever cracks the code first, finds that cryptographic solution, they get the reward. And that reward is, new Bitcoin and transaction fees.
Oh, okay. So it's not like they're just like poofing Bitcoin into existence.
Right.
It sounds like it plays a bigger role in Bitcoin.
Exactly. It's all about security and making sure those transactions are actually legit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The article makes that clear. It's about keeping the Bitcoin network secure.
Totally. And, by using all that computing power to solve these like super complex puzzles, the miners are basically confirming all these pending transactions and grouping them together into new blocks. Then those blocks get added to the blockchain. And that's what makes it so hard to like mess with past transactions, because you'd have to redo all the work for every block afterwards.
I see. So like once it's in there, it's pretty much set in stone.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so these rewards, the Bitcoin and the fees, that's what incentivizes people to do this mining, right?
Right. It's the whole point. Keeps them going.
Okay, and the article mentioned that this whole reward system keeps going until all 21 million Bitcoins are out there in circulation.
Right.
So what happens when we hit that limit?
Well, the article says that once we get to that 21 million Bitcoin cap, which is predicted to be around the year 2140.
Okay.
The creation of new Bitcoin through mining will probably just stop.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, miners will mainly be compensated through the transaction fees that users pay to have their transactions included in the blocks.
Okay, so it kind of shifts from that initial incentive of the Bitcoin reward to the transaction fees being the main source of income.
Exactly.
So based on what we've read so far, the main purposes of mining are validating transactions, keeping that blockchain secure and uncorrupted, and adding those new blocks that keep the whole Bitcoin system moving forward. And the Bitcoin reward is what kicks it all off.
Yeah, gets the ball rolling.
I thought it was really interesting how the article said that Bitcoin mining is necessary to maintain the ledger of transactions upon which Bitcoin is based.
Right.
So it's like the foundation.
It's fundamental, yeah.
Okay, so how Bitcoin mining is done has obviously changed a lot since it started.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Huge changes.
Right. The article talked about how it's gone from people using their own computers to mine.
Yeah, like back in the day.
Yeah.
You could mine Bitcoin on a regular desktop. But as Bitcoin got more popular and those puzzles got more and more complex, the competition just exploded.
Oh, wow.
So that difficulty increase led to people developing specialized hardware, like these things called ASICs, which we'll get into more later.
Right.
And that's also how these mining pools formed, where lots of miners combine their computing power together to increase their odds of solving a block.
Oh, so they team up.
Exactly, and they split the reward.
Okay, and the article also brought up a big issue, which is the environmental debate. It straight up says that Bitcoin mining is not considered environmentally friendly, so that's definitely something we should get into.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about the energy stuff a bit later on.
But first, I want to understand how Bitcoin mining actually works.
Yeah, let's break it down.
The article uses a really simple analogy. To explain the core concept, it talks about like a guessing game, where you have to guess a number between 1 and 100.
Okay, I like this one.
So can you walk us through that and how it connects to actual Bitcoin mining?
Sure. So imagine I picked a secret number between 1 and 100.
Okay.
Let's say it's 19. Then I ask a bunch of my friends to guess the number. And the rule is whoever guesses 19 or any number lower than 19 wins. So if someone guesses 25, they're out of luck. But if they guess 15, they win because they were the first to get within that range.
All right. So I get the basic rules of the guessing game, but how does that connect to Bitcoin mining?
Well, in this analogy, that secret number I picked, the 19 represents something called the target hash in Bitcoin mining. And this target hash is like a specific, really big number that the Bitcoin network generates. So your friends guessing numbers in the game, they represent the Bitcoin miners. And they're trying to find a specific digital number. But instead of just guessing randomly, they're doing these super complex calculations using cryptography and special hardware.
I see. So it's like they're trying to hit a target number.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the idea of a hash.
Right.
The article says it's a 64-digit hexadecimal number that is the result of sending the information contained in a block through the SHA-256 hashing algorithm.
Sounds complicated.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Think of SHA-256 as like a digital fingerprint machine. You put in all the data about the recent Bitcoin transactions, and it spits out this unique string of letters and numbers. That's the hash. And for Bitcoin, this fingerprint is always a 64-digit hexadecimal number. But what's really interesting is that even if you change just one tiny thing in the input, like one letter, the resulting hash will be completely different.
Oh, wow. So even a small change makes a big difference.
A huge difference. And that's really important for security.
Right, because the article said it takes less than a second to make this hash. But with current tech, it would take centuries to reverse engineer it.
Right.
Like they gave that example of changing at to A,
Yeah.
and it produced a totally different 64-digit number.
It just scrambles everything up.
So that one-way nature of the SHA-256 algorithm, that's what makes Bitcoin secure.
Exactly. It's super important. It makes sure that once a block of transactions is processed and the hash is made, it's basically impossible to go back and change those transactions secretly. Because even a tiny change would create a totally different hash. And then that block hash gets included in the header of the next block, which creates this unbroken chain of blocks, the blockchain.
Okay, so it's like each block is linked to the one before.
Exactly. It's all tagged.
That's how they prevent tampering.
Yeah, because any change would break the chain.
So let's go back to that target hash.
Okay.
The article said it's used to set the mining difficulty and that it's made by the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
So what are miners actually trying to do with this target hash?
So the target hash is basically the benchmark that miners are aiming for. Their goal is to find a block hash, which is that unique digital fingerprint of all the transactions they put together that's less than or equal to this target hash. And the Bitcoin network is the one that sets this target hash. And the lower the target hash is, the harder it gets to find a block hash that fits.
So it's like if you make the target number smaller in that guessing game.
Yeah, exactly. Fewer guesses will actually win.
And the network changes this target hash every now and then.
It does, to keep the rate of new blocks being added to the blockchain pretty consistent.
Okay, so it's like adjusting the difficulty level.
Exactly.
To keep things running smoothly.
Yep.
The article shows an example of a block hash, which is this long string of numbers and letters.
Right.
And then a much shorter target hash. So miners are basically trying to create a block hash that falls within a certain range.
That's it.
Defined by this target hash. Okay, so then how does the actual mining process work?
All right, so the mining process. It involves generating a hash of all the pending transactions and then adding this special number called a nonce.
A nonce.
Yeah.
What's a nonce?
So nonce stands for number used once.
Okay.
And it's a key part of this whole process.
Yeah.
So the mining software takes all the info about the Bitcoin transactions, the ones that are waiting to be confirmed and put into a new block, and it calculates the initial hash of all that data. Then it starts adding this nonce starting with 0.
Okay.
And just counts up with each try. So every time the nonce increases, the software recalculates the entire hash.
So they're basically just trying over and over again.
Pretty much.
With different nonce values.
Yeah.
To find that one combo that makes the resulting hash less than or equal to the target hash.
Exactly. That's the goal.
And if the generated hash is still higher than the target, even with the added nonce,
right,
then they just try again with the next nonce value.
Yep. Keep on trying.
The article said that once the nonce reaches like 4.5 billion,
yeah, a huge number,
it rolls over back to 0.
Right back to the beginning.
And they even use something called an extra nonce.
Yeah, that's like another little piece of data they can change to help them find that winning hash.
So it's like a never-ending search.
Pretty much, it's a massive computational lottery. And every miner on the Bitcoin network is doing this at the same time, all trying to be the first one to find that magic combination.
Oh, wow. That results in a valid hash.
One that's below the target. That's the golden ticket.
Okay, and when a miner finally hits that target, the article says their proposed block gets added to the blockchain.
Right.
They get the new Bitcoin as a reward, plus the transaction fees. And then the whole process starts over for the next block.
Yeah, it's a cycle.
Oh, and it also said that those blocks, when they're full of transaction info, are about 1 megabyte in size.
Right.
Okay, so since the reward goes to whoever solves the puzzle first, that's created this crazy global competition.
Oh, yeah, it's intense.
The article mentioned these vast numbers of computers mining 2,947.
Non-stop.
And that's why these mining pools were created.
Right. Yeah. Because it lets the smaller miners join forces and have a better chance of solving a block.
Even if it means they got to share the reward.
Exactly. Teamwork makes the dream work.
And to give you an idea of how big this whole mining thing is, the average Bitcoin network mining rate in December 2024 was something like 796 exahashes per second.
Yeah, that's a mind-boggling number.
Yeah.
I mean, an exahash is 1 quintillion. That's a 1 with 18 zeros after it. Hashing attempts every second. It's impossible for a normal person with a regular computer to compete with that.
Yeah, that's insane. So all that work they put in to find a valid hash, that meets the network's target. That's what they call proof of work, right?
Exactly. It's all about proving you've done the work to validate those transactions.
So it's not just about finding the hash.
Right.
It's about all the effort and resources that go into it.
A computational power, the energy, it's all part of the proof.
And the article says that proof of work is what makes it so hard for anyone to try and mess with the blockchain's history.
It would just cost way too much. In terms of computing power and energy, to redo all that proof of work.
So it's like a security measure in itself.
It is. Yeah.
But even though proof of work is key, the article says that full consensus, which is like the agreement across the whole Bitcoin network.
Right. That a new block is legit and should be added to the blockchain.
Happens after the winning miner submits their block, and everyone else double checks that the hash is good.
That's like a final check to make sure everything's in order.
And the article says this verification process doesn't use nearly as much energy as the mining itself.
Not even close.
Okay, and one last thing about how Bitcoin mining works. The article talks about confirmation.
Right.
So because each new block references the hash of the block before it. If you try to change an older block, it basically breaks the chain.
Exactly.
Because it changes the hash of that block, and then all the hashes of the blocks that come after it.
It's a domino effect.
So a newly mined block isn't really considered final until a few more blocks are added on top of it.
Right.
The article says they usually wait for 5 more blocks. So a total of 6 confirmations.
That's the sweet spot.
So the more confirmations a block has, the harder it becomes to change anything.
It's exponentially harder. After those 6 confirmations, you'd need an insane amount of computer power to rewrite the blockchain.
So it's basically impossible at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so now that we understand how it works, let's talk about the reward.
Oh, the good stuff.
The Bitcoin reward has changed a lot over time.
It has.
So when Bitcoin first launched back in 2009, the reward for mining a block was a whopping 50 Bitcoins.
Yeah, that's a lot. Especially now.
Right, and then the article said this reward gets cut in half.
It does, roughly every 4 years. Or every 210,000 blocks.
Okay.
So in 2013, it went down to 25 Bitcoins.
Yeah.
Then 12.5, then 6.25. And after the most recent halving, which was in April 2024, it's now 3.125 Bitcoins.
So it keeps getting smaller and smaller.
It does. It's part of the plan.
And this halving thing that's just built into Bitcoin's design.
Yeah.
So it controls how much new Bitcoin enters circulation and make sure they don't go over that 21 million limit.
Right. Keeps it scarce.
And on top of the Bitcoin reward, miners also get transaction fees.
They do?
From the users whose transactions are in the block they mined. And the article said that once all 21 million Bitcoin are mined, which is predicted to be around 2140, those transaction fees will be the only way miners get paid.
That's right.
So the idea is that as the Bitcoin reward keeps getting smaller, the competition to include transactions will keep miners incentivized to process those transactions and keep the blockchain safe.
Keeps the whole system running.
The article even said this competition should keep transaction fees low.
Hopefully, yeah. For everyone's sake.
And they mentioned the Genesis block.
Oh, the first one.
Oh, that's a classic.
Which was the very first block on the blockchain. And it had that initial 50 Bitcoin reward.
A piece of history.
It's pretty crazy how the reward has changed since then.
It's a big evolution. From 50 Bitcoins to 3.125 and eventually to just transaction fees. Okay, so let's talk about mining difficulty.
Right.
The article defines it as how much work it takes to generate a number less than the target hash.
Right. So how hard it is to actually solve the puzzle.
So how does the network determine this difficulty level?
So it's a dynamic thing. The Bitcoin network uses it to regulate how long it takes, on average, for miners to find a new block. And the goal is to keep that average block discovery time around 10 minutes. no matter how much computing power is on the network.
Okay, so it's like a self-adjusting system.
Exactly. It keeps things balanced.
So if a bunch of new miners join the network and bring a ton of new computing power,
Right.
the difficulty goes up.
It does.
To make sure the average block time stays at 10 minutes.
That's right.
And how does it do that?
It basically increases the required difficulty. To find a valid block hash, it makes the target hash smaller.
Yeah.
So it's statistically harder to find a block hash that fits within that time frame.
Oh, so it's like raising the bar.
Exactly, making it more challenging.
And if miners leave the network and there's less computing power,
Then the difficulty goes down. It becomes easier to find a block.
so it always tries to maintain that 10-minute block time.
That's the goal.
And this difficulty adjustment doesn't happen all the time, right?
Right, it happens every 2016 blocks, which is roughly every 2 weeks. The network checks how fast the previous blocks were mined
Wow.
and then tweaks the difficulty for the next round.
Oh, wow.
Keep it around that 10-minute mark.
Okay, so it's constantly adapting.
It is. It's pretty clever.
To show how hard it is to mine Bitcoin these days, the article gave this crazy comparison. On December 4th, 2024, the mining difficulty was over 103 trillion.
Yeah, a massive number.
And they said that the odds of a single computer finding a hash below the target on one try were like 355,000 times lower than winning the Powerball
Oh, wow.
with just one ticket.
So, yeah, it's really tough.
So you need a lot of power to have a chance.
You do.
Okay, let's get into the costs of Bitcoin mining.
Right, let's talk money.
The article breaks it down into three main things: electricity costs, the cost of the mining systems, and the network infrastructure.
Right.
So starting with electricity, that seems to be a big expense
It's huge.
and a major part of that environmental impact we talked about.
Exactly.
Running those powerful mining systems 24/7 uses a ton of energy, which means big electricity bills.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
The article said the total energy use of the Bitcoin network is like that of some small countries.
It's a lot of power.
And then there's the cost of cooling all those systems.
Right, because they generate a lot of heat. They get hot.
So you need good cooling to prevent them from breaking down,
You do.
which uses even more electricity.
It all adds up.
So next up is the mining systems themselves.
Right. The hardware.
The article said you can technically mine with a regular computer by joining a mining pool,
You can.
but you won't make much money
Not really.
because you're splitting the rewards with everyone else.
They get spread out pretty thin.
So to really make money, you need those specialized ASIC miners.
Yeah, that's the key. That's what the big players use.
What are ASICs exactly?
So ASIC stands for Application-Specific Integrated Circuit. They're basically computer chips that are designed for one thing and one thing only, mining Bitcoin. They're way more efficient than regular CPUs or GPUs.
Oh, okay, so they're built for speed.
They are. But they can be pretty expensive.
Yeah, the article said they cost anywhere from like $4,000 to $12,000 per rig.
That's right. And the faster they are, the more they cost.
So it's a big investment.
It is, yeah.
Okay, and the last cost the article mentioned was network infrastructure.
Right.
They said that while the speed of your internet isn't super important, the latency is.
It is.
Which is basically the delay in communication with the network.
You need a quick connection so you can submit your solution as fast as possible.
And those big mining farms, they
Right.
also need to invest in internal connections
Right.
to link all their rigs together.
It's all about efficiency.
So for a Bitcoin mining operation to be profitable, the article said the total cost of everything, the electricity, the hardware, the network, has to be less than the value of the Bitcoin they mine.
Right. You got to make more than you spend.
But the price of Bitcoin can change a lot.
It does. It's volatile.
So the profitability of mining can change quickly too.
It's a risky business.
And the article said that individual miners especially might have lower profits and longer times to make their money back.
It's not a guaranteed thing. You got to be smart about it.
Okay, so let's look back at how Bitcoin mining has evolved over time.
Right. A little history lesson.
The article talked about two key things that have shaped the mining landscape: the emergence of custom-made mining machines,
Right.
which has led to some centralization, and the importance of mining speed, like how fast you can do those hashing calculations.
Speed is everything in this game.
So back in the early days, people were mining with their CPUs.
Yeah, just their regular computers.
But as the network grew and difficulty increased, it became clear that CPUs weren't cutting it.
They were just too slow. The article said that at the difficulty level in early 2015, it would have taken a desktop CPU thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, it's crazy. To find one block.
That's wild. So after CPUs came GPUs?
Right, those are the graphics cards. They were way faster.
Yeah.
but they use more power, and sometimes gamers couldn't even find them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because miners were buying them all up.
So that led to the development of ASICs.
Right, those custom-designed mining machines that are way more efficient.
And today, pretty much all serious Bitcoin mining uses these ASICs,
Right.
which can cost hundreds or even thousands